Hi, everybody. Thank you for being patient. I am just waiting for Edmund to join in. We had a bit of a technical glitch. I think he should be here shortly. Thank you all for joining us. We'll be connecting with Edmund Sumner very shortly. Yeah, there he is. And hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. Let me just give me a minute.
Yeah,
I'm
you
gonna.
can set your camera in and we would like to see you.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
That's good.
Mm.
So thank you, Edmund, for joining us on Epistle OPD.
Mm-hmm.
And we're really glad that you're here with us to share your tips, your experiences with architectural photography. And let's talk a little bit about how you think we can establish connections through images to build a narrative. Uh, uh, we try and keep the sessions less than 45 minutes. And it's a simple format. I'll ask you a couple of questions and we'll just sort of go with the flow of the conversation.
Sure. Okay.
So I am not going to, I mean, I have obviously sort of taken the liberty to introduce you before you joined in. But why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and your journey in architectural photography?
Okay. Well, I'm a professional architectural photographer. I've been photographing architecture for well over 20 years. I guess it's a very particular niche of photography. It's not something one sort of stumbles into. Typically, these practitioners' journeys are such things as maybe one trained as an architect or maybe trained as an engineer, and then sort of slowly got involved in that. As for me, my dad was a architect, so well, sort of interior architect, and my brother and sister and quite a few of the families. So I was always brought up in quite interesting architectural environments, and I just found I had an affinity with it. I enjoyed it a lot, and I think I particularly like communicating with images more than words, which is why I avoid these sort of things. So, yeah. And my connection with India is that I came over to India in 1990, and I was one of those sort of annoying hippies with a long hair and a six pack, and
I remember, yes.
yeah. Well, I mean, but yeah, and then I came back on my honeymoon in 2000. Was it 2000? Yes, 2000. And then we met, and well, the next time I came, it was thanks to you actually. You and with the fashion school. So that was with Manat and Sonali kindly invited me over back in was it 2008 maybe?
Yeah, I
2008,
think it was 2008 or 9. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then I've been sort of coming back ever since, really, and generally once or twice a year. I was over in January and February for this year, and obviously it was wonderful. I mean, I had a lot of work. I was over for quite a long time, but it was beginning to get tense, and
Yeah.
one could feel the sort of build up, and I kind of feared the worst. And then I was back in the UK, and then I was working in France and Switzerland, and everywhere I went seemed to go down with the plague. So I kind of got convinced I was a super spreader. So
Oh.
well, I don't think I wasn't. Anyway, and then no, so now back in the UK, and obviously there hasn't been so much travel over the last year, but one lives through pictures.
Right. So you said that you've been born and brought up in an architectural home, had a lot of family who practice architecture or are within the fraternity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you work a lot with architects. What is your process of photography for architecture? Do you sort of take a brief from the architect first, or do you have your own process? Do you just sort of go in and start? I mean, what is unique to Edmund's process of architectural photography?
Well, I think one has a discussion, and it's a very interesting macrocosm of photography because in some ways, architects are not professional media buyers, and by that I don't mean that in any sort of derogatory way that they're not buying or commissioning photography. Of course they are, but they're not professional media buyers, and they're not art directors or brand managers or marketing people, or they haven't got that sort of mindset. It's more about sort of, they know they need to record something and they want to sort of show what they've done, but they sort of haven't really sort of, they're very, very, very involved in it. They're very close to it. So in a way, it's very important to sort of inject some objectivity and a little bit of distance to the process. So I think one has a bit of a discussion, and in that discussion, I think as a photographer, I'm trying to work out what it is that is needed. And I think what it is that's needed is not always what it is that is wanted. I can't preempt how one might tackle a project. Ideally, one would meet and have a look around at a project. I think one can gauge how long it's going to take, roughly. A day, 2 days, 3 days, a week. And then I think there's a bit of a discussion, a bit of a back and forth. And, I think one's always sort of having the end product in mind. Why it's being commissioned, where do you think it might go, what is the purpose of it?
Okay. And so how do you sort of establish connections through images, to build narrative? What is your approach?
Well, I think always the most difficult shot, the most difficult image to capture is the one image that shows the whole project in its entirety. If it's a building in the mountains, it's a case of finding a vantage point that shows the building in its mountain, so in the mountains. I mean, that might sound very, very obvious, and in some ways it is. But the simplest, most obvious sort of image is quite often the hardest. It's very easy. I use the sort of analogy of snooker, where is that you go in, you find one shot, and then you're thinking of the next shot, and then the next shot, and then the next shot, and then you're sort of daisy chaining that. But it's very, very easy to lose track of the bigger picture. Trying to send, trying to show, the project in its context, to try and sort of explain what it is in a sort of logical manner, really.
Right. What do you think, being at the other end? I mean, you did say that architects are too close to their projects, sometimes, and that can become a challenge in sort of planning the photography and planning what the building is intended to communicate, really.
Yeah.
So how do you think architects can plan their shoot better, if that's, if I may say that, or how can they ensure that the project photography is eventually communicating, a connection or the narrative, really?
Well, I think the most important thing is to establish a relationship with a photographer. To try and establish a long-term relationship, so that in the future, if one begins to understand a little bit about that particular architect's work, what is important to them, what they want to show, and I think then that's sort of half the battle is sort of done. I think to try and get a photographer involved at as early as possible. I think it also depends on what the project is. I mean, if it's a office building, it's an office building. That's what it is. There's a particular way of photographing that. So, but I mean, let's say, for example, it was a new house by a lake, or it was or if it was a museum in a mountain. I think there's no harm in trying to talk to a photographer and just explain a little bit about what the project is, and particularly if you know them, so that you're beginning to sort of think about that project more and more and more, so that by the time, I mean, I've had projects where I've actually sort of been flown out to go and look at something. I mean, this is a bit dramatic. I'm talking about like flown out to just outside UK, like to France or the Channel Islands. And but I think for this particular architect, there was one very, very important project, and he was sort of shooting it as if his whole sort of career depended on that particular project. So really wanted to sort of get it right. So we went out and we started talking about photography at a very, very early stage. But this is all, quite dramatic. I think one can just start to have a conversation. And I think just to plant a seed about how one might cover that project.
Yeah. In fact, I think personally for me as well, I think what is really interesting is if the photographer sort of comes on board while the project is still on the drawing board, and then you sort of take that story through, right? And I've spoken to a lot of, people here as well in India, where, if you can capture, right, the building literally sort of taking shape, taking form, evolving, as the design process sort of goes along. And that, I mean, is that something that, sort of you think that helps convey the narrative better?
Yeah, I think so. But I think also, visually, in terms of looking at a project before it's finished, I think one needs to flirt a little bit visually. I think one needs to sort of just not show too much, just little tiny hints at what something might be. I think so much of the time people sort of spread bomb it like this and this and this and this and that and that, and it's all so sort of over the top, whereas just little sort of tiny bits of information, tiny fragments will start pricking people's minds, people's attention. Now this could be, so I mean, if one had most photographers, I would have thought, I mean, if I had a call in the UK, someone said, can you come and have a look at a project with me, one would go, and it wouldn't really cost anything. It's just because it's a proposal about, and I think with some people and some, I'm finding more and more they're after these, actually do begin to sort of commission some sort of teaser images, and I mean, I remember in India there was one particular project that I shot, and I shot it complete, and it was incredible, of course. But I remember about a year and a half before, I went round to look at the construction site, and looking back, I wish we really had shot that site, because it was crazy. It was absolutely, you know, it was just visually stunning. But, you know, to sort of just kind of do that, just to add a little bit of mystery to sort of, yeah. So, for visual dialogue, I think, yeah, it's just about teasing really, and showing little bits and bobs, and not everything all the time.
So do you think, do you feel that there is this, there's a lot of pressure on photographers to sort of, you know, in today's world of awards and publications and, you know, like you said, a lot of marketing. Do you think there's a lot of pressure on photographers to only focus on the good image rather than, on a good image rather than the narrative itself?
Well, I think it depends how you define good.
On a sexy image, I mean, that's what I mean. If you think, you know,
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not necessarily thinking that a sexy image is particularly good. I mean, what, you know, I mean, I'll give you a very, I'll give an example. There was one shoot that I did, and I consider it actually probably one of my best. And it was, you know, we'd gone out, we'd gone out to look at this building, and this architect, as I say, he was sort of, you know, talking like his career depended on this project, and it was very, very nice. And we were discussing, you know, different things and how the weather was going to be. And the thing is, it was up on a mountainside, and in the Isle of Man, which is a little sort of landlocked country in between England and Ireland. And so we discussed how sunny it was going to be and how this, and, you know, we were having a lot of very, very intense sort of chats. And anyway, so then we went over to photograph, and also we had arranged for the client to go away, and I think they were going to buy him a ticket, and anyway, then we went over to the project. We found the client was there, and also his furniture was really, really bad, and I mean, really bad. And so we had a real problem, but also it was raining. It was terrible rain. I mean, the weather was awful. So basically I said, well, look, you know, really what we can do is we can cancel the shoot, or what we can do is, like, look, you know, I don't mind staying a few more days. I'm not going to keep the meter running, so to speak, on terms of fees, but why don't you get some people from the office? We'll hire, and we'll just move all their, you know, we'll redo the furniture, and so we stripped the house back and we restyled it, and so it was coming together, and the weather just got worse and worse and worse. And then I was thinking, okay, so sorry, I'm talking about, you know, what is sort of good, what is sexy, what is, it's not often, sometimes it's not what you think it is. So you know, I was expecting a, you know, perfect sunny day, and the weather just got worse and worse and worse. And so I started doing some test shots, and actually they looked really, really good. And so I basically started carrying on photographing in this style, and it completely transformed how, I think, how this project was portrayed. I think how this project was seen. I think politically, you know, in the sort of political, but I mean, how it was seen in the architectural realm, you know, from a, you know, blue sky sort of chocolate box kind of house to a far more moody, much more thoughtful thing. So in terms of sexy, I think, and good, I would question both of those terms. And I would just go in. I mean, I'm not to say that some of the images might not be seen that way. Of course they are, but you don't know what those things might be. I mean, I remember the project we worked on, for example. I remember the brief was to capture modern-looking students, and, you know, and I mean, that wasn't particularly from you. It was just that was the sort of, I think, because the university were paying some money towards it, and the whole idea was that we were going to get, you know, modern, bright, you know, people, and there were lots of students in Nirvana t-shirts, you know, sort of sitting around drinking tea, and, you know, I did some shots of it. But actually, you know, it was the shots of the local ladies you know, sort of, and some local ladies sort of, you know, doing the cleaning and the working, and actually those became the iconic images. And well, for me anyway, I mean, and those weren't particularly asked for or wanted. So in terms of in photography, I always say the most important thing is to give a client what they need, not really what they want, not necessarily what they want sometimes, you know. So but I mean, you know, you don't shove that down their throats. It's just subtly about, you know, entering a dialogue and trying to provide things. Now, I mean, another thing that, one thing that's quite, you know, frustrating is that, you know, one shoots images of a project. I mean, if one does a one day's shoot, you might provide, I don't know, 20, 25, maybe 30 shots, you know. And more often, well, not, you know, I found sometimes that, you know, you're there, you're shooting, you're doing all this thing, you're providing some images, and you're trying to, you know, say, like, okay, well, I think these particularly might be the ones that should be, you know, used. And then I'm finding more and more that architects begin slipping in their own shots. You know, they've commissioned all these things, and they're like, oh, well, and then this one, and then this one. And, you know, that's because they sort of haven't got that sort of distance, and they haven't got that, you know, it's not that widely done. And of course, it's you know, it's very difficult to sort of tell your client off, or but you know, I think there also needs to be a bit of discipline in how images are disseminated and how provided and shown.
So I think, yeah, that's a very important point actually, and I think that gap is slowly getting bridged now. You know, the gap between the architect or the client and the photographer. Because I mean, at the end of the day, I think, yeah, there is a, I mean, as a professional, you do need your own flexibility to create that narrative. I mean, that's the reason why we're having this conversation in the first place. So tell me, the world has changed today, right? From with the internet and a smartphone, and a smartphone with 3 cameras coming in, and you know, so what do you think? According to you is you know, is driving this narrative today? Is it social media? Is it video content? Is it reels? Is it shot? Is it images that are shot on an iPhone, or is it traditional photography? And while I mean, of course, every platform has its own merits and, you know, pros and cons. But what I mean, within the architectural domain, what do you think we need today?
Well, I don't think. I think the world changing is I think sort of overplayed. People still want to look at architecture. Architecture is still architectural imagery is still the sort of currency by which architects live and die by. It's what they win awards. It's what they win commissions. It's what they. It's what makes them known. I mean, if you think about falling water, for example, everyone feels that they've been there. You know, yeah, you know, you've been there. I've been there. I've seen the waterfall. You know, but no one's been there. People think about the image. So that desire for immortality has not changed. How one goes about that has changed. The sort of architectural hierarchy has, and I sort of see this almost as sort of part of the sort of global sort of populism has been sort of taken down, sort of, you know, from El Croquis or Domus or Architectural Review at the top of the tree, whereas in the old days you would photograph a project, and you know, if the big D gave a nod and you got the cover, you know, that you were in, and then slowly it would sort of taper down, and you know, and it might go into local things, and then eventually it might appear on a blog, and then eventually it might appear on well, I guess one didn't have social media now. And then whereas it used to be, if you put something on sort of social media, that was the sort of death nail. Whereas now it can be the opposite. And I think if skillfully managed, that really can be quite interesting. I think visually, what I find fascinating at the moment, particularly, is there's a very interesting dance going on between professional and amateur imagery. It's in some ways, I think professionals are trying to recreate a much more sort of amateur look, a much more sort of relaxed from the hoof, and sort of amateurs are trying to look more professional. And so there's this sort of interesting dance going on, which I sort of find fascinating. It's I mean, I think, but I think the big notion that everything has changed and we're in a completely different landscape is not true. I think the central desire is the same. I think the central purpose of what we do is the same. I think how we do it is different.
Right, fair point. So Edmund, before I take on my last question to you, before I take on some questions from the audience, the first, actually, yeah, I have two questions. One is we have a lot of aspiring architectural photographers who are also watching this, a lot of studios who are watching this video. So if you had to share three things that you focused on in your sort of creative journey, that you think are tips for others that they could prioritize in their careers, what would those three things be?
Is this someone starting out?
Yeah, or anybody. I mean, they're trying to sort of get their photography act together.
Well, I think follow the love, not the money, for number one. Number two, get a very, very, very thick skin. You know that expression, thick skin, as in don't don't
get flustered.
Yeah. Number three, I think take things very, 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 very slowly. This is not a rehearsal. This is the real thing. But we're not in any massive hurry. I think just to take things. I mean, I remember the first shoot I ever did. Sort of. I think I spent 2 days, and I think I produced 6 shots. Well, first professional shoot. So.
Interesting. Great, thank you so much. That's I think they're super useful for any sort of creative professional. One last question that personally I would like to ask you. I don't think we've ever discussed it earlier. What has been the most challenging shoot for you?
What has been the most challenging shoot? Well, I mean, I've had good challenging and bad challenging. I think good challenging is when I've turned up on a building and it's not been built and it's raining and they want to basically show the building in the sun with lots of people around. So that's sort of bad challenging. I think good challenging, I think, is to sort of, I've had projects where a building is designed. I've worked with Ando from Japan on a couple of things, and there was a time in Mexico I was photographing Casa Wabi, and Edmund, no, 2 things: no cactuses, and to make it invisible. Oh, okay. So yeah. So basically, I had to photograph the building without cactuses and to try and make it look invisible. But I think I kind of interpreted what he meant, sort of.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to take a couple of questions from the audience right now before we close the session. If anybody wants to ask Edmund something, this is your time to ask him. So one is, how is it that while designing buildings, can you make maximum accommodation possible on a small landscape?
Well, that sounds like an architectural question. I'm not an architect.
Yeah, I guess that one is a little arcane. I also think the person is trying to ask actually, how can you sort of cover the maximum sort of landscape, in when you're trying to shoot?
Well, I'm not sure you necessarily want to cover the maximum landscape, to be honest. I'd need more specifics to give a decent answer to that.
Okay. Do you think in the larger scheme of things, it is important to cover every single detail, or is it more important to convey the big idea, the larger narrative, like we discussed?
Well, I think that's the sort of thing I was sort of saying in the beginning, is that the one hero shot is the most, in some ways, the most obvious. It's the most difficult to find. You see that shot and they're like, oh, well, it looks quite obvious, but actually it's very, very, very difficult to get that one particular shot. Anyone can run around getting a little detail, a little bolt of light against a door, someone walking up a stairs, a sexy shot looking in the window, or but these are fragments. So I think a mistake that I think we've all made as photographers, but I know I was definitely guilty of it, is in the beginning, is that you'd go in and you see something and it's like amazing, and you'd capture one of these things, and then you capture another, and you capture another, and then you'd get so carried away that at the end of the day, you'd look at them and you'd have 30, maybe 25, 30 little sort of fragments of little bits and bobs, but actually there wasn't one, or there wasn't really one shot of the whole thing. So unless you had a very intelligent and very accommodating art director, or they could do a layout that would sort of try and sort of show your images. So I think really the most important shots are the ones, once you've got that one shot, then you can relax a little bit. And those shots you should get early, because it might well involve climbing, climbing up. Quite often with assistants, I'll send them out sort of scouting out nearby buildings just with iPhones, or so one can think about that, and then you can think about what time of day you might record that from there, and then you can think about all the little bits and bobs. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that response. Another question that we have is, do you focus a lot on equipment?
I used to. I don't really care about equipment anymore.
Right. And when planning a shoot, what are the 3 things that you sort of keep in mind, which are most important for you?
I think time. So how long one needs to photograph that project. I think obviously how the sun might move. Now in India, you're obviously blessed with so much sun, so you can be relatively predict that at 7:30 in the morning that side is going to get some sun. I mean, a very good trick is to ask architects to start time stamping images. So they might be walking around a building and they might, the sun hits the building here, the sun might hit the building here. So time, just start to get a feel for those. But I think also it's very important to have time for unforeseen things to happen, and those unforeseen things are always the things that make the shoot work. They're what makes the shoot interesting, I think.
Great. So one last question: do you plan your shots meticulously, almost like getting people to model and things like that, or do you try and capture reality?
Reality, I mean, yeah. No, I don't plan them meticulously. But I think probably when I was a younger photographer, I'd be more worried about these things. I think because I've done so many shoots that I just get a feel for how it's going to be. So I try and not overplan things, I think, let's say.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you, Edmund. This was super useful. People have already, I think a lot of people want to watch it again, and whoever
Okay.
has missed it will get to see it live on the episode feed. Feel free to share it on yours as well. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your journey in architectural photography. It was a pleasure to speak to you. I hope
Yeah,
to see
you.
you in India soon, or in London.
How is
Wherever.
India? How is it all over there?
We're okay. Delhi is not. I mean, Delhi has a lot happening, so we're all just trying to stay home and stay safe. And yeah, that's what we're trying to. You know, I think we're all hoping that things get better soon. I mean, yeah, we all can together just hope for that. So yeah, thank you so much, and
Okay.
see you
Nice
soon.
yes,
Hopefully,
see
yes,
you hopefully next year.
in some part of the world we'll meet again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye.
See you. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.